let these things kind of compound, but also, always start a new session once you realize things are kind of off the rails, right? Because not only is context expensive, the more we have doesn't always mean better quality. In fact, at a certain point, there's a tipping point where it means worse quality, and bad context can corrupt the output. So the real critical thing for engineers is to manage the context. And what does that mean? Well, one, I think it means persisting a lot of information outside of the context window so that we can bring it in, right? So this is things like scratch pads for things we're working on, memory files, the agent's MD, those kinds of files that help the agents have context to what you're working on. We also need to be very selective when we're selecting that context. So that means only pull in what's relevant for this step of the problem, right? Don't just pull in everything that might be useful. And so that could mean, things like bringing in the right at mentions for files that we're referencing. That could mean making sure we don't have unnecessary MCP servers enabled. And it means, making sure that the agent has the right data and that we as a human have curated that data for the agent. And then as it's getting bigger and that window gets bigger, we want to summarize and trim and compress that context, right? If we've gone through a whole big deep dive and debugging session with the agent, and now we think we have the problem and the solution, well, that's great. It might be time to compress that context and just focus the agent back in. Okay, now we understand this problem. We're going to go fix it. And then the other most important thing is to isolate context. And I think this is why we've seen this huge rise in the past 6 or 8 months of parallel agents, because splitting work across several agents or several sessions can help things not accumulate and really drive this kind of task separation. And again, if you think about it, aren't these all of the same things that I would tell a brand new engineering manager about managing a junior engineer? Like the story I tell here is when I was early in my career, I spent a lot of time as an engineering manager and product manager before I went into the dark arts of developer relations. And in my first job ever as an engineering manager, I was at a healthcare software company. And there was this new thing coming out called an iPad. And that dates me a little bit. But it was released in the market, and we thought this could be a great place to collect patient history, that form you have to fill out every year at the doctor. It's very critical to assessing a lot of your, risk of disease. But having to fill out from scratch every time is not fun. And so I designed in this other archaic tool that some people may have heard of called Balsamiq, basically a wireframing tool, a wireframe of what this would look like. Now, that wireframing tool used things like Comic Sans and like silly smiley face icons as placeholders and a lot of other stuff like that you'd expect from just a wireframe. And I handed that to a set of interns that we had working for us that summer, thinking this is a great greenfield project for them to take some time on. And, a few weeks later, I got back a working prototype, and the font was Comic Sans, and there were silly emoji placeholders. And that's because that's what the spec had in it. And so whose fault was that? Obviously, it was not the intern's fault. It was my fault as an engineering manager for not giving the right context to those junior engineers as to what's important, what's not, and what we really need to focus on and what problem we're solving. And so I think the